Hello, hello. First of all, I want to apologize for the weeb noise. I'm playing on XXX Potato God, and that's my NA alt, and I had no Myoko on it, so I decided to use the ARP, I think Nachi, one of the ARP Myokos regardless. That's why it looks like it has no camo. Anyway, this is another ranked commentary, of course, and here we can see matchmaking in all its glory. This game kind of points out one of the issues with matchmaking, which is of course that it doesn't differentiate between cruisers that have radar and cruisers that don't have radar. So you sometimes end up with this really skewed matchmaking games, for example like this one, where we have no radars at all and the enemy has 3 radars. Obviously in the current smoke meta, this is a considerable advantage for the enemy team. But at this point you shouldn't be giving up if you end up in this situation, because just because the enemy has an advantage doesn't mean they know how to use that advantage. In fact, squandered advantages is one of the most frustrating things to me in ranked. I give my team an advantage and then I watch how they don't utilize it, or they squander it, or whatever, the usual things. And for example, in this case, while we have a lot of smokes with the help of the Fijis, of course, they have the radar to counter it. But the only way their radar counters our smoke is if they are in range to radar us. Now, if we don't push into their radar range, that means they have to push into our range to radar us. So this means that in order for them to take advantage of this, if we play passive, in order for them to take advantage of their radar, their radar advantage is that they have to play aggressive. Playing aggressive with Belfast and Atlanta isn't easy, and well, you saw how I did it in my Belfast game. I used terrain to get close enough to use the radar, but of course one of the main issues with getting close and using the terrain is that sometimes you just have the radar for the team. You have to pick awkward spots. For example, on this map I like going up the 7-8 lines behind that island and radaring from there. You can radar the position I'm sitting in right now in the smoke, but you can't shoot them yourselves. Your team will be doing the damage. And of course one of the main issues with ranked battles is that people are very, very selfish and they don't like radaring if they can't shoot themselves. So your average player will of course never actually do this. They won't sacrifice their own radar for the advantage of the team, for the team to gain that damage advantage. That's not going to happen. So of course that's the classic random battle attitude. I can't shoot, so I'm not gonna radar, and that usually leads to a lot of squandered potential by the ships themselves. Now, moving on to the Myoko. That was a lot to talk about radar. Moving on to the Myoko. In the beginning, when you're facing... Basically, the Myoko gets much stronger the less opponent ships there are. Now, unlike, for example, the Fiji, it can't heal, but it has quite good armor. It has a big HP pool, and most importantly of all, the HE shells, not only do they do good damage, you also have a very high fire chance. In fact, you are the best fire starter per volley by far. So, of course, that's probably why you see me taking a lot of volleys at these battleships, because one of your roles, one of your goals in fact, as a Myoko, is to burn down the enemy battleships. But there's no doubt that the Myoko has been pushed back from the current meta. Like, it has been power creeped upon very hard. The introduction of the Belfast, the introduction of the Fiji, these things have pushed back the strength of the Myoko significantly. It's no longer the king. The last time ranked 7 was in ranked, the Myoko was the undisputed, at least in my book, it was the undisputed king of cruisers. That no longer applies because, well, this season is much more passive because, of course, if you add a bunch of cruisers that can smoke themselves up, that's a lot of mobility that's lost, and if the battleships can't sail around shooting the enemy cruisers, which is usually their job, they're gonna of course hide in the cruiser smokes as well, and then we get these 2 smoke blobs on the other side, on each side of the map, shooting at each other. Anyway, regardless of the power creep, it still has great potential. Now you notice I took a time before I took that shot, and that's something you kind of want to incorporate in the Myoko when playing it. All other cruisers tend to have fairly quick reloads, and they are able to deal, like if you miss a volley, it's no big deal, you'll be reloaded soon enough and you can shoot again. That's not the case with the Myoko. The Myoko has one of the longest reloads at 14 seconds. It means if you pull the trigger, you're going to have to wait a long time. In most cases, if you're trying to shoot a DD and you're too hasty and you miss, that DD will be in cover by the time you have reloaded. So take your time, take an additional second to make sure your volleys are actually landing, and get those accurate volleys off every time instead of just spamming shells mindlessly. Now here you of course see what I was talking about. Battleship burner already forced his repair. I got 2 fires with a volley. I am being focused, but I'm bouncing most of it. Once again, if you angle, this thing is quite tanky, and I'm just trying to get into cover. Let's see if I can get another fire. I want to keep working on the Scharnhorst, since of course I have forced his repairs, so I want to keep working on him. Now, as I said, in the beginning though, because of this smoke meta and this passivity and all of this, there's little point to be sailing around in the open in the Myoko, because well, you're going to be the only target, because everyone else is going to be hiding in the smoke. And trying to angle, and the whole idea with playing the Myoko is that you shoot your full volley, and because it has such a long reload, you can angle your ship between volleys and then you turn back in to shoot again. That's how you play it. You shoot, you angle, you shoot, you angle. You kind of like zigzag back and forth with the ship. That's how you play the Myoko to its full potential. But of course, trying to do that when there's so many ships able to shoot you, they're spread out all across the map, means that, well, the whole angling part kind of goes out the window, because it's impossible to angle against so many targets at once, and when you turn back to shoot, there will be someone who will have your broadside. This is especially evident when there's multiple battleships alive on the enemy team. So whenever there's at least 2 battleships alive or more, usually you just want to be buddying in with the Fiji in a smoke. You can see here I'm kind of sailing with these Fijis. I'm using their smokes to my advantage because I don't want to take any unnecessary risks. I don't want to be the guy in the open who gets shot at, so I'm just going to buddy with these guys. I am actually doing quite a lot of spotting for the team, something you might not have noticed. You might wonder, how are we spotting that Atlanta? He's behind cover. That's of course my spotter plane in the air, and that's of course one of the advantages the Myoko brings. Especially in games where you only have one DD like this one, and he's quite afraid to do any aggressive scouting. For good reason, of course. They have 3 radars, he can get killed extremely easily, so he's playing very safe, very careful. He still lost a bunch of HP, which is expected. He's against 3 radar cruisers, his life is hell. But the spotter plane helps significantly in that sense that it gives you a lot more scouting that you wouldn't get otherwise. You get this free cheap scouting, and you get scouting you wouldn't otherwise get. For example, people hiding behind islands, spamming HE or whatever from behind islands. Usually you wouldn't even be able to target them, but thanks to the spotter plane, they are of course seen from the air, or well, with Wargaming's mechanics, they're seen through islands. Whatever, you get the point. Of course, I want that Scharnhorst to get rid of, or want them to get rid of that Scharnhorst, because if they delete that Scharnhorst, suddenly there's no real huge AP threat left. In fact, if they get rid of that Scharnhorst, the only real big AP threat they will have left is going to be the Colorado. And that means I have a single target I can angle against. Okay, here's one of the major weaknesses, of course, of the Myoko: turret traverse. See how long it takes for me to turn my guns to shoot him when he's trying to get behind that rock. It took any other ship would have probably easily been able to nail him all the way, but Myoko's turret traverse works against it there. That's of course why Expert Marksman is an absolute must-have tier 2 perk on this ship. You can skip it on many other ships. On the Fiji, for example, you can just straight up get that Adrenaline Rush as your tier 2 perk, but on the Myoko there's no option. You have to get Expert Marksman. The turrets are just so sluggish. The Scharnhorst has been pushed back quite far, which is of course great, but he's still not dead. The Atlanta decided to abandon his position, not really sure why, but I don't mind. I'm gonna take a pot shot at him then. Our Fiji gets deleted, which is unfortunate, but on the bright side, we're probably going to be able to trade with the Scharnhorst. Even though we have, of course, this DD advantage. Usually if you get a DD advantage and the enemy has no DD, that means you can scout a bit more aggressively, you can push a bit more aggressively. But we have 3 Fijis, and they have 3 radar cruisers, 2 of them which are Belfasts, which can smoke themselves, and suddenly you realize it's pretty damn hard to push into that. However, that turning point I mentioned earlier, the timing you kind of have to recognize as a Myoko, it just happened. Their Scharnhorst died. And now suddenly, life gets a lot easier to me. Because, well, of course, things like Myokos, Belfast and these, they can do damage to me, but it's gonna take them a while to burn through my HP and armor. I got 30k HP left, I've been playing fairly safe in the smokes and such, so I got 30k HP to basically play with at this point. And when you bring the Myoko, if you're just gonna sit in the smoke the entire game and do nothing but spam shells from the smoke, then you might as well bring a Fiji, because the Fiji is much better at it, because, well, it's got heal and it's got its own smoke and faster rate of fire, probably higher DPM as well. So I mean, if you're just gonna sit in a smoke and just spam from within a smoke, then you might as well not bring a Myoko, because you're kind of missing the point. The whole point of the Myoko has always been, kind of like with Atago in competitive games, is the fact that it can roam. It can roam, it can flank, it can bring a new point of view to the battlefield, not only a new point of vision, meaning like scouting from a different direction, but also a new angle of threat, forcing the enemies to react to you. Either they have to kill you, or they have to hide from you, or whatever options they have. Basically, they are forced. You are forcing the enemy to react to you, which is, of course, one of the great things about the Myoko and how you're supposed to play it. Doing this is very hard when everyone's still alive, especially when all battleships are alive, of course. I mentioned it because of the lack of angling, but when there's only one battleship alive, the Colorado, and I know exactly where he is, behind that island over there, suddenly it's pretty easy to be able to do this. In a 1 versus 1 against a battleship, the Myoko absolutely shits on battleships. I kid you not. 1 versus 1 versus any battleship, the Myoko can probably crush it if you play it correctly, because you can dodge his shells while you burn the enemy to death in very, very short time. Especially ships slow moving like the Colorado, well, that thing just burns to a crisp. I see he's popping out behind the island. I dropped the torps. You notice I haven't really been spamming the torps before this. 10 km torps. I haven't really been in a position where they might even be useful. But now that he's finally pushing around that corner, I preemptively fire since I know he's going around. And I start angling. See, this is what I mean. Shoot my full volley, turn around and angle. Instant fire on him. He panics or he potatoes. I mean, it's pretty common in this ranked so far that people blow repair on the first fire. Once again, full volley on him. Some pretty decent HE damage. And I angle again. You see I'm being targeted, but they don't really feel like shooting at me because I'm angling all the time. And I turn back in and fire again. You keep doing this wiggling back and forth. It's even if no one is shooting at you, keep doing it, because as you saw, I was being targeted, and one of those guys will want to shoot you, but if you keep doing this, it's very hard for them to shoot you. Now, unrepairable fire number 1 on the Colorado, unrepairable fire number 2, because he's used his repair, and this is kind of what I mean. Battleships struggle so hard against the Myoko, and this is kind of what you want to do in the Myoko. You want to find this weakness. Like this Colorado was hiding in the back because he didn't want to get spammed to death, but I'm kind of hunting him in the Myoko. He shoots, I dodge and turn his shells. Plenty of time to do that in the Myoko, it's agile enough. And I turn back in and I shoot him again. And he's got these fires burning. You look at my damage numbers top right, how quickly they're adding up. He got high caliber. He's gonna burn to death guaranteed. Like, there's no saving him anymore. He's absolutely guaranteed dead. One of my teammates finishes him off since he pushed up high enough that my teammates could actually reach him. And you notice that I was playing it very, very safe. No unnecessary risks. I didn't even take any damage. I kited away from his teammates to make it hard for them to actually help him. And I avoided his shells to make sure he couldn't hit me. Now that that threat is gone with, well, now I push in again and I harass. Once again, at this range, your shells gain a fair amount of elevation, which means you can lob them over hills and such to harass people, as I'm doing here. Oh, Atlanta low HP. Of course, make sure you switch targets. If you aim at something behind a wall like that, then of course the shells are going to be landing on top of him if your crosshair is on the right spot. We are losing people once again though, so it's still a 4 versus 4. Atlanta is very, very low. Can I get another hit on him, please? Fiji is smoked up, but they still have radars left, so that's not really a safe position to smoke. Oh, and lost vision of the Atlanta. That's unfortunate. He's very low though, and we are at 946 points. So they're kind of forced to make the move. And this is kind of what I meant with that they have the advantage, but they don't really know what to do with it. And this is very common. Radar ships are so used to people pushing into their radar. All they have to do is sit and wait, and if someone pushes in their radar. And they are not very good at pushing into the enemy and actively using their radar. And that's why you should never give up if it happens to be in a case that the enemy has a radar advantage. Having an advantage is different than actually being able to use that advantage. Harassing the Myoko, he's set on fire, he pushes up because of that, tries to get away from my fire. Like, you see that the Fiji got killed, the Myoko got killed because of that. You kind of create opportunities for your team, because I'm herding them away from me. They have to angle and avoid me actively. And now if they try to push in, they're going to push into a crossfire, and I'm capping the base behind them. And this is really what you're going to be doing in the Myoko. This isn't a particularly high damage game. This is more about the positioning. You create an additional battlefront, an additional worry, this damage dealer from this other angle they have to deal with, and mostly this annoyance really, but high damage dealing and hard to kill annoyance in this case. Atlanta finally tries to make a move since they're about to lose, and as soon as he leaves cover, I kill him off and the game ends. Now, as I said, not really the highest damage dealing game, but it kinda encapsulates the Myoko playstyle extremely well. When there's multiple threats, you play safe with smokes. When the threats start to lessen, suddenly you become the threat, you become the hunter, the distraction, the annoyance, everything that you can be in a Myoko. I did top the scoreboard, but not really any huge number. Still, it's of course always satisfying to do that. This is of course in the 5 to 10 bracket, so not the most potato bracket, but still the quality of this bracket drops each day as the better players move on and the worst players of course get stuck. That's kind of how it always goes in ranked. And of course, what's quite interesting in the scoreboard is much like with the Pensacola commentary, where I noted how much additional spotting your fighter plane does. You can see it here as well. Damage upon your spotting, 33,000. And most of that is, of course, from my spotter plane or fighter plane. So shouldn't be underestimated how valuable it can be. Pretty unlucky with the fires. Mostly that whenever I get fires, they had repair ready, but still 17 fires. That tells you a lot about the fire chance this ship has. When you face multiple battleships, you can of course get significantly higher damage numbers, since the Myoko counters battleships quite hard. Anyway, let's move on to my recommended build for this ship. Right, starting off, modules of course. Upgrade wise, can't really go through that since this is a Arc Myoko. Premium damage control, hydro, not enough carriers to justify anything else, and a catapult fighter, which is of course very useful. I wouldn't switch it even if I could. Main armaments mod 1, AA guns mod 2, not just in case you face carriers, but also for shooting down spotting planes. Very useful since you can get that 6 km range on your AA just using this thing, which is quite decent. Steering gears, because IGN cruisers have especially squishy rudders. This repeats itself all the way to the Ibuki, I think. They all tend to lose rudder quite often. Steering gears to be able to use that fire angle type of tactic. Priority target, you want to know how many are aiming at you. Expert marksman, absolute must have because the turret traverse is so sluggish. Demolition expert, you want to make your fire chance even better. Concealment expert, you need the stealth in ranked. Now at this point, if you have additional points to spend, which I don't, I only have a 10-point captain, probably something like Adrenaline Rush would be extremely useful. Other things that might become very useful would be things like Vigilance, for example, incoming torpedoes, not just for yourself, but for your teammates. That's a very team-oriented perk. People often only value it for themselves, forgetting that the team can benefit. Double fighter plane, AA builds maybe in case carriers start popping up, or just tanky builds in general, something like High Alert for faster repair, so you don't get burned down, basics of survivability. There's plenty of options you can go for, but as long as you have this base build, there's honestly a lot of flavor available to the Myoko. Mostly though, you want to build upon the tankiness, which is of course the one advantage this ship has over pretty much every other tier 7 cruiser. Anyway, that was my Myoko ranked commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it.